that line by the waiter. Yeah, that line is very powerful. So powerful in its simplicity and honesty, which is, "I'm so sorry."
One take, one take, one take, one take.
Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with talking about this great show, which is right here, and it's called Twin Peaks. We've been going through the episodes, discussion episode by episode, starting with the pilot, or one version of the pilot. And this, ever since we've been devoting a video discussion on each of the episodes. Now we are at episode 14. And for those, I'm assuming, who are watching this video right now, I'm assuming you've already seen episode 14. And so you know that it's quite an episode. So let us talk about this episode and the events leading up to this, and the events including that are included in this really great episode 14. And I've mentioned it before, but I'll say it again. I am not in any way a Twin Peaks expert. I don't want to hold myself out as a Twin Peaks expert, so I don't have a grasp on all of the details. Really, I don't. But I'm coming at this as a fan, and I've watched it so many times. So I'm very fortunate. I feel very happy to be able just to share a little bit of how I feel about the show in each of the episodes, especially now because this is giving me the opportunity to rewatch the episodes. I've seen it so many times, but now watching it again, I never tire of it. On the contrary, I feel so excited every time I watch this show, including this episode 14. So let's get right to it. There is a lot. Yeah, there is a lot going on here. So I think we can start with the beginning, which I think must go down in history as being one of the great recaps of the previous episode ever. You know, I'm talking about the first couple minutes of this episode where you have all the Cooper and Truman and Andy and Hawk and Federal Bureau of Investigation Regional Bureau Chief Gordon Cole and Philip Gerard, or Mike. And I think he's in Mike mode. And so because he's recalling certain phrases about the Great Northern Hotel while they're all standing in this like distant shot drinking coffee. And it's a type of perfect sort of chrysalis, or just it's one of those great shots. I mean, this is an episode, right, from Mark Frost and David Lynch, directed by David Lynch. So in many ways it has a kind of an already Lynchian feel, does it not? I mean, there is the air of the sinister, there's the air of the moody and atmospheric, but it's also over a cup of coffee, and it's a distant shot, and there's also the great humor and comedy that's interwoven within this very moment, and it's all set in these couple minutes, and it's also meant to recap what was going on with the interrogation scene in the previous episode. So it's genius, absolutely genius. And also this idea of Hawk going to Harold Smith's, and the idea too that was mentioned by Gordon Cole in the previous episode. I forgot to mention it, I think, in the last video discussion, which was about also part of the forensics examination, was the revelation about the scraps of paper that were found nearby the crime scene, and how they might match a diary. And Cooper then puts two and two together and says that there was the idea about the secret diary. Maybe there's a connection between the two points. And so Hawk is going to go to Harold Smith's and try to figure out what's going on. And of course, we get Hawk visiting Harold Smith's place, only to find it in chaos, and things have been, it is in a state of chaos. And also we see in the distance, in the room, a body hanging from what we assume is the ceiling, or something from above. We don't see everything, but we see a part of the we assume to be the lifeless body of Harold Smith. So this is the end of Harold Smith, as we see. It's a very grisly and quite disturbing and very sad ending to this character who I think held our attention, my attention certainly, throughout the episodes that he was in. There was a type of quiet, maybe even a frightening or scary aspect to him, but there was also a sense of the loneliness and the tragedy of that. And there was a brief moment there where he found a connection with Donna, even to the point where there was an embrace and kiss between the characters at the end of the about two episodes ago. But now we have this very sad and very, very sad end to this character of Harold Smith, who also, as we know, had a type of connection, with Laura Palmer, and what we seem to understand to be a very important one, given the fact that, among other things, he had been in possession of the secret diary of Laura Palmer. So, but now we have the secret diary of Laura Palmer now in the hands of law enforcement when they discover it. Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, and they begin to examine it, or Cooper does, in a scene a little bit later in the sheriff's office when this is when Audrey comes in, and Audrey reveals to Cooper about the news that she has learned from her time at One-Eyed Jacks, and also earlier in this episode when she is essentially interrogating her father, claiming and revealing that she, the character of Prudence and the mask, and that scene involving Benjamin Horne at One-Eyed Jacks, visiting one of the new girls, and of course we assumed that he didn't know at the time, but we did, and now it seems like Audrey's revealing it as well, that this was in fact Audrey. So the stakes are heightened to quite a dramatic and very, very disturbing level. Not that they weren't before, but now they are being revealed in this way. So it's quite a dark scene, I think, this confrontation between Audrey and her father, but she's also asserting herself, Audrey is, in a way that is almost a sign of a type of, say, maturity, and there's a deadly seriousness, to the tone of her voice as she is confronting her father with this information about what she knows, who she knows. She knows about Blackie, Emery Battis, and Ronette and Laura, and their connections with also Ben Horne and owning the place, and he reveals that he's been owning it for, 5 years or so. And this whole thing about Emery Battis and the perfume counter at Horne's department store, and how Laura was there only for a short time. And this makes sense with what Emery Battis had said in a previous episode when he was tied up and he was being made to tell certain truths to Audrey at the time. Laura had been there, but she'd only been there for a short time. And this is consistent with what Ben Horne is saying now. Also, it's a very direct and honest conversation. We're not sure if Ben Horne is necessarily telling the truth here. We can't confirm it because it's just his words here, but he seems very honest. He seems like there is some there. I mean, in other words, it is very tempting to believe him. Let's put it that way. When he says, first of all, that when Audrey asks him point blank, did you sleep with her? And he says, yes, right. I loved her. That's what he says. And there's even a picture of her, a shot of a picture of her, which we assume to be on his desk. Well, that's the assumption anyway. And then also she asks him point blank, did you kill her? So this is where the suspicion over Ben Horne and his possible involvement in the crime, maybe he's a suspect. This is where it creeps in. It's already been there, I think, since the very beginning. But now it becomes very prominent and very direct. Now, this also links to the idea of Philip Gerard or Mike going to the Great Northern together with Doc Hayward is there as well. So Doc Hayward, well done, Doc Hayward, and all these ball bouncing people and other people in the Great Northern. It's quite a circus. I mean, it's like something out of a Fellini movie. It's really wonderful. It's brilliant. And so it's amazing, too, how just at the precise moment that Ben Horne seems to be emerging, Mike, Philip Gerard, seems to be having a fit, another physical, agitated situation. So what does this mean? And so then after Audrey comes to visit Cooper at the sheriff's station, Audrey leaving Cooper and Sheriff Truman to talk, and so without chemicals, he points, right? So this idea that bringing suspicion or beginning to suspect Ben Horne in terms of his possible involvement in the crime of the killing of Laura Palmer and the near killing of Ronald Pulaski. So this is a big deal. This is a very big deal indeed, and so we have a type of a real almost a snowball type of development rolling down the hill at a very high pace, all pointing towards Ben Horne as being possibly even the prime suspect in the killing of Laura Palmer. So it's really quite a dramatic development. It's something that I think has had its connections with maybe suggestions or feelings that one might have had since the very start of the show Twin Peaks. So Ben Horne is becoming a person of great interest from the perspective of law enforcement, that's for sure. So, and that'll bring us to the climax of the episode. But before we get to the climax of the episode, we should also point out the continuing plot line with Shelley and Bobby and Leo, and then also the return of Mike, the other Mike, right? Bobby and Mike. And so it's nice to see the two of them again. Because we haven't seen a lot of Mike over the course of these episodes, have we? So we see him return. But before we get to the Bobby, Mike, and Leo scene, let's go to the Shelley, Bobby, and Leo scene. So at the table, figuring out all the bills, and Shelley calculates that after everything has been calculated and subtracted using the insurance proceeds, what they're left with is $42 for the month, and that's what they need to live on for other things, $42. Now, Bobby is trying his best in the middle of the table there to try to work things out, calculate something, do whatever, but he seems to be also losing his patience, and he's saying, I can't tell my mom and dad I'm going to be sleeping over at Mike's every night, so I have to go to economics class or something. So there is also this feeling that maybe Bobby is beginning to feel a bit worn about this situation that he now finds himself in with Shelley and Leo, and the amount of money that he wasn't expecting to be so low. So it sounds like he might try to be wanting to get himself out of the situation. Who knows? But Shelley is adamant. She says, you promised you would take care of us, and so she's trying to assert or remind him of what he indeed said. And so this is, I think, the first sign of a type of well, maybe there might have been some signs before that, but this is a sign of a type of crack, or type of cracks, if you will, in the relationship between Shelley and Bobby, I think. I mean, up to now, for the most part, I think almost entirely consistently, they've been very intimate with each other. They've been expressing their love for each other, and the like, especially when Shelley was in the hospital after what happened to the mill. You remember that scene when Bobby visited her, and she said, he said, I love you. And yeah, I think I love you too. And so, and this is their acknowledgement of that in the open, as it were, because before it had been clandestine and secret. So, but now Bobby seems to be a little bit, I don't know, maybe wanting to get out of it, or maybe not wanting to have to deal with all this hassle, etc. So there's that. Also, right, this leads later to Shelley going to the Double R Diner and having to tell Norma that she's got to quit her job because she's got to take care of Leo full time. So this is the idea of she would be quitting her job, and so this is the quitting the job scene. But Norma, being Norma, is very much she's very calm and collected, and she says you can always come back anytime. And of course Shelley's very sad, but she's also very she's grateful for this relationship that she has, I suppose. So that we'll go into that as well. But before we leave Leo, we should mention too that scene with New Shoes, right? Leo seems to make some kind of outward expression of something, a brief glimpse, if perhaps, of life before becoming inanimate again. But he mentions this thing of new shoes, new shoes. And so that leads perhaps to Bobby thinking, maybe Leo's got something hidden away, some cash hidden away. He never went to the bank. So the idea is brewing in Bobby's head that maybe Leo hid something or hid something away. And then when this idea of new shoes is mentioned, then a notion comes to Bobby's head. Maybe it has something to do with shoes, shoe repair or something. So he's got to pick up the shoes. And if you recall, too, shoes and the drugs that were hidden in the flooring that Andy was able to discover through a bit of wonderful Andy-like serendipity, and also the idea of the shoes and the soles of the shoes when Andy is reaching for that vial of what was it, his semen sample, and then he goes to try to reach for it under the sofa there, and then they notice the soles of his shoes, and that leads to this idea of the shoes and Philip Gerard and Leo Johnson. So it all seems to be connected in terms of shoes, right? Now we have shoes, Bobby and Mike now going, and we see Leo making more sort of bodily gestures with his the bobbing of his head and sort of dribbling. But so there is some kind of movement going on. He's not totally inanimate. And so we'll have to wait and see if this develops into more movement or consciousness, or maybe it leads to nothing, who knows. But in this scene, we have Bobby and Mike trying to break open the shoes or the soles of the shoes, maybe trying to find something. So they find a little cassette tape, right? What does this cassette tape mean? What does it have recorded? Who knows? But they find it. So this might lead to something. Let's remember this going forward. And we might see Bobby actually later again in this episode in a very memorable fashion. We'll talk about it later going forward. Now, going back to the Double R, to the diner, and Norma and Shelley, of course, we have at that time too, entering into the diner, Nadine and Ed. So again, Nadine's still thinking that she is in high school, seeing Norma, and then so she's saying how she thought that she understood that Norma and Ed had broken up, understanding or thinking that they're still high school students, and the idea that their parents are away, or Nadine's kind of confused. Whose parents are they talking about? Whose house are they talking about? And the like. And Nadine is essentially fawning over Ed, who's still got that wonderful Ed look on his face. That like, that look of confusion and fear, that wonderful look. And so I think also too, this scene is significant because, well, it's significant for a number of reasons. First, that exploding chocolate milkshake in Nadine's hands. It's quite a remarkable moment. Exploding chocolate milkshake. Whenever you have a movie or TV show that has a scene involving a chocolate milkshake that explodes, it demands attention. You know what I mean? So here's one. It just explodes in her hand. Nadine with that superhuman strength, and the blood that is on her hand, or is dripping from her hand. I think it's blood anyway. And so the mixture of blood and chocolate milkshake, it's quite a robust combination, to put it mildly. And you can see the kind of look of disgust and horror on Ed's face. But also this scene is significant too because, Nadine being Nadine, there's a sense of a type of boisterousness and almost aggressiveness in her state of bliss and happiness. She seems almost to be turning off Norma and Shelley. Shelley goes very politely to get fill out the order. But this is also, right, a kind of face-to-face between between Norma and Ed, which I think hadn't happened since their breakup, at the gas station several episodes ago, when Norma had to tell Ed at the time that Hank would be out, and so that led to their sort of breakup, or at least they couldn't see each other for a while. Actually, she didn't want to see him for a while anyway, however long the word "while" meant. There had been a glimpse of the two of them by Norma when she was in the hospital after the mill had burned down, but I think this is one of the first times that they're actually seeing each other face to face. I know it's not a direct conversation per se, but at least it is something, right? And so that's also very significant. And we'll have to keep this in mind too, this triangle of Nadine, Norma, and Ed. And again, the look on Ed's face. Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. It's really great. And so let's keep that in mind, of course, going forward. Now, also you have to keep in mind too, the so I mentioned Ben Horne and Audrey in that angle, and also mentioned, let's see, Shelley Johnson and Bobby and Leo Johnson in that angle. And so we have to mention too, right? Ben Horne. Ben Horne is now trying to, seal a deal for financing with Tojimura. And so he reveals that Jerry seems to have checked the backing or the references of in Osaka and also the Tokyo Bank. So there are two cities in Japan being mentioned, Osaka and Tokyo. So that means and apparently Jerry had checked out the background and everything seemed to be cleared. So this figure Tojimura seems to be telling the truth. At least that's the impression. So there is a kind of a meeting between them. That this is the precise moment where the authorities enter because they decide it's time to arrest Ben Horne, or not arrest. They don't actually arrest him, but they say they want to bring him in for questioning. I should be very clear. They want to bring him in for questioning, but they do take him forcibly. When he tries to leave, he says, "I'm just going to go out for a sandwich." Again, Ben Horne and the sandwiches. It's really great. Remember the sandwich or the bread and stuff, and it's great. So, and the marshmallows, and so Ben Horne and food. It's really wonderful. And we should also talk about nuts. There's a lot of nuts, the peanuts and things later on in this episode. At least I think they're nuts, but we'll talk about those later. So a lot of food going on, as always in Twin Peaks, as always. But here we have the no, that moment when he's taken away forcibly. And Tojimura and the other gentleman are just left there to figure out what's going on. But and then we have a scene later where Ben is taken to the sheriff's department, assumed to be put into custody. And then we have the appearance of Margaret, the log lady. And so something is going to happen. I'm not quite sure what or when, but something's going to happen. So there is something that might be afoot. What's going on? Something that might be afoot. Yeah, there is quite a lot actually that we know because, well, just to lead up to what's going to happen. We also remember from the previous episode that Maddie has decided to leave Twin Peaks because, as she said, she came for Laura's funeral and also to look after Sarah and Leland, but now she feels it's time to go. And so we see a scene earlier on in the episode where she's talking with Sarah and Leland. It seems to be like early hours or morning hours. And she tells him it's time to go. And so Sarah seems to be a bit surprised. Leland seems to be open to the idea. And so that's that. There's the shots of there's the shot of the playing record, Louis Armstrong, I think, and also there's shots of the mantle, and the pictures, Laura Palmer's pictures, some young photos when she was young. There's a picture of her and Donna there as well. There's also a picture of Laura Palmer. There's the famous sort of the dance or prom photo, but there's also a photo of her with long hair that appears a lot. That, when Ben Horne's talking about Laura Palmer and how he loved her, that appears there. It also appears a little bit later with Maddie, and when she's sitting on the couch in a very, very scary moment. Well, yeah, we'll get to that scene later, of course. But Maddie's sitting on the couch in this scene, albeit in perhaps, relatively speaking, more peaceful surroundings. But yes, so here she reveals to the Palmers that she's going to leave. And so, Missoula, Montana, right? So, but all is not well, it seems, at the Palmer residence. In fact, all is not well is perhaps an understatement. All is indeed rot. There is a lot of rot. There is a lot of fear, and there's a lot of horror that is going to happen here, right? Because, as the giant says, it is happening again, right? So we are back at the roadhouse. And so we have the wonderful appearance of Julie Cruz singing, at least in the context of this episode, or seen to be performing 2 songs. And as Donna and James are there, and as a little bit later, Sheriff Truman and Cooper and Margaret, the log lady, up here. So first we have the song Rockin' Back Inside My Heart, and we hear this playing first as we see Donna and James meeting. Donna standing, smoking a cigarette, and then she sits down, and they have a sort of a very almost, what's the phrase, somewhat lugubrious in tone, perhaps, conversation talking about Harold and what happened to Harold, and James trying to assuage Donna's concerns, but Donna seems to understand that she had maybe had some responsibility over what happened to Harold more than she would have liked, and so that she took advantage of the hurt inside, and James said, we're all hurt inside. Incidentally, too, I don't know what the situation is necessarily with bars and peanuts, but on the table when Donna and James are talking, you can see on Donna's side the table's pretty clean in terms of the tabletop, but on James's side there's a lot of like peanut shells, and it's pretty dirty too. So it's like, wow, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Those look like peanut shells to me. I'm not sure. Peanut, not shells per se, but like peelings or something. So I think they're peanut peelings, but it looks pretty messy. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if this is a common thing to do in bars or tables in bars. I'm not sure. I would assume that you put it on a napkin or you put it in a little bowl or something like that. But anyway, that's definitely true for like pistachio nuts. You have the nut, and you remove the shells. If I were James, I would probably put all the stuff in like one pile. But it seems to be all over the place in front of us. But I don't know. Maybe that's the etiquette. Maybe that's nothing out of the ordinary. But in any event, anyway, so that's interesting. It reminds me too of the peanuts, the nuts arrangement when he meets Sheriff Truman in a prior episode about who the bookhouse boy is that's going to help him. There's also the stuff that Margaret's eating later on in the episode with great intensity and ferocity, much like how she chews. I mean, the way that Margaret chews food and gum, it's like, I just want to chew and just throw the gum against the wall. I love Margaret. Here's another fan club that I belong to, the Margaret fan club. Oh, she's so great. She's absolutely great. But yeah, so just take a look at those shells and the peelings on James' side of the table there. I wonder if it's a Formica tabletop, by the way. But in any event, so the scene between the two of them, talking about Harold, but then it goes into what is one of my favorite moments in a Twin Peaks episode ever. Again, it's again in the context of the song "Rockin' Back Inside My Heart," which is a great song, by the way, and it's so great for so many reasons. There's that weird, like, I don't know if it's a saxophone or something, but it just has that weird moment in the middle where it sounds like it's just chaos, and then it goes like da 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 da, and then that wonderful moment where Lara Flynn Boyle, who plays Donna, lip syncs or mouths the words, as Julie Cruz is singing, "I want you." You hear it. I don't know about you, but when I first saw that, I mean, I was already quite, I was already in the Donna fan club, but moments like that, make me totally smitten. And so it's just you can't blame James for that look that James has. He kind of looks and is like smiling to himself in that wonderful James way. James is so cool. He's so cool. And then he cuts back to Donna, and Donna has a slightly sad expression as she's still mouthing this latter half of that refrain. I want you rocking back inside my heart. So there is that beautiful moment, one of my favorite moments in Twin Peaks ever. I love that moment, and I love it because there's the lip syncing action or movement. You get a number of this. You get a lot of moments in David Lynch works where you have characters like lip syncing or mouthing the lyrics to a song. There's a very famous section of this, say, in Mulholland Drive, for example. There's a very, very famous scene that is like this in a film called Blue Velvet, for example, and a character who's named Ben. But here's to Ben, right? Be polite. We'll talk about Blue Velvet, hopefully, if we haven't done so already. But for now, let's see, what was I saying? Yes, so this mouthing the lyrics or lip syncing, this is very important in the world of David Lynch, and it's here done so effectively, not only because of the absolute charming nature of Lara Flynn Boyle as Donna, but also too, and I always forget this, but this is a really important moment between the two of them, because in many ways this is a kind of reconciliation. They kind of got back together. They kind of reconciled in the previous episode, did they not, with the whole thing involving Harold and rescuing Maddie and Donna from Harold. And Donna says, they embrace, and Maddie decides to leave, and Maddie says, you two belong together. So, but this is actually the first time that it seems like that reconciliation is quite complete between the two of them. The lyric lip syncing part is in a way a kind of a cherry on top of the sundae, in a manner of speaking. So that's very important. Also, this scene is important too because James reveals that Maddie's leaving, but Donna says, "Oh, that's where she never told she never told me about it." So it's weird that Maddie wouldn't tell Donna. Maybe Maddie was gonna say something later, a call or something. I'm not sure. Maybe she wasn't gonna say anything at all. Who knows? We'll never know, shall we? Because, right, as this is going on, we then fade into another song, which is being played here, again, also performed by Julie Cruz. And it's called The World Spins. Now, we just kind of have to say it, right? This is one of the most important moments in Twin Peaks thus far, and indeed one can say that this sequence is one of the most important moments in Twin Peaks ever. Now we have the slow tempo, the almost haunting tempo of the song, and the almost beautiful, poetic, almost nonsensical, dream logic-like lyric to the song. It has a lovely simplicity too. I think it speaks to the elemental. The sun comes up and down each day, right, or something like that. And so, when we see people drifting in and out of the roadhouse there inside. We see Bobby there. We see the waiter there as well. And then who do we see under the bright shine of a spotlight? And then things turn silent. I think almost from still. People seem to be standing still, not moving at all, except for Cooper and someone on the stage who is someone that we've seen before, is the giant. And indeed, sitting next to Cooper, we have Margaret. Margaret seems to be aware of something as well. She seems to be seeing this as well, right? So very interesting stuff as well about how much Margaret knows, or how much she's able to know and see. But for now, Cooper definitely sees this. And the giant is saying to him, right, that famous line, which is, "It is happening again." Yeah, it's happening again. And what does this mean? We go back to the Palmer household. And we should say, too, that just before this, we had the very eerie scene of Sarah Palmer kind of dragging herself down the steps, or down the stairs, into the living room. And we had a shot of the empty sofa couch, that weird sofa couch in the corner there. Wow. And Sarah coming down, and the carpet camera. And you can actually see almost, I think it's the camera, there's like a drag on the carpet there. So it's almost like the camera's being dragged along the carpet, which reminds me too of that scene of the carpet. And I think it was episode 8, I think, where Maddie's looking at the center of the carpet there, and suddenly there's a trail of stain that goes across, and she starts to scream uncontrollably. This is also the moment when Leland reveals that his hair has turned white, right? So that you can see now in this episode that as the camera's on this low angle, or this carpet's point of view, you can actually see almost the drag of what appears to be the camera. It's almost like the stain of that Maddie saw in her dream that also appeared in that episode. But yeah, so Sarah comes down, and we have the end of the record player, but it's still twirling. Again, not just the world spins, but the record spins as well. It reminds me too of Inland Empire, as well as a number of times when the record was spinning like this. And also the roulette wheel as well. The roulette wheel spun. Just remember when Dr. Jacoby was hit from behind, and we had a close-up into his eye, much like we had the close-up into Laura Palmer's eye in the video when you can see the reflection of the bicycle that ended up being James. So many things about eyes and spinning and circles, and here are the eyes, right? I should mention the white of the eyes. And here we have not necessarily the white of the eyes, but we have another type of white, the white of a horse. A white horse, or the image, or the vision, or the dream. Who knows? Again, visions and dreams. What's the similarity? What's the difference? But anyway, we see emerging almost out of nowhere under the flash of bright light, a white horse that emerges in the middle of the room. And then Sarah Palmer looks, and then she seems to faint. And as she faints, who do we see? The camera then slowly goes up, and we see Leland standing there in front of the mirror in the room. What is going on? What is going on here? And also I should mention two shots of the ceiling fan. Remember all the way back from to the pilot, the importance of the fan, the ceiling fan. And the ceiling fans are very important. Fans are very important in David Lynchworth. Lamps are I mentioned lights, lights and lamps are very important in David Lynch's world. We should recall too this scene between Maddie and James in the previous episode when they're talking by the water before Maddie says goodbye. And James is talking about the love, the intensity of the love. And how, and maybe it might not last forever. It's like talking about shining light. So it reminds us too that there's a lot of shining light in the world of Twin Peaks, and especially in this episode. But the kind of shining light that we see seems to be very ominous and scary indeed. So we see the shining light in terms when the giant appears, and the light is very bright on Cooper. And also we see the shining light as it shines onto this white horse before Sarah passes out. And then we see another shining light, do we not, in the scene that is to come. As we lead up to that, of course, we see Leland in front of the mirror. And then we see in the reflection, who do we see? This figure that we understand now is Bob. Bob is in the mirror, and then we go back to Leland, and one of the scariest moments we see the superimposition of that scary look. And that's the kind of laugh, too, of Bob. And so the understanding, therefore, is that Bob is inhabiting Leland Palmer. Leland Palmer is the host, the human host for the spirit, who is Bob. Yes, and so we see then the preparation, putting on gloves, standing there, eerily patient, waiting for someone to come down. And who is it? Do we hear the voice of? It's Maddie and Sarah, Uncle Leland. And she mentioned something about, what is that smell? It smells like something burning. It smells like something burning. So we have to remember, too, this idea of, we've talked about, or we've heard spoken about in Twin Peaks, especially starting actually from episode 8, right, after everyone's in the hospital, and also from Dr. Jacoby, if you remember, when he recalls Leland Palmer entering into the hospital ward to kill Jacques Renault. Dr. Jacoby mentions this idea of the smell of scorched oil. And so the idea of smell, this rotten smell, like burning smell or scorched oil smell. So when Maddie says here, it smells like something's burning, one can imagine that perhaps the smell that she's referring to is scorched oil. And so if that's the case, and if we remember, Leland was in the hospital, and now Leland, we understand, is being, Bob is in Leland, or Leland is Bob. But that's another question too. What is the relationship then? What's going on between Leland and Bob? We're not quite sure. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in any event, there seems to be this association between Leland, and who is now Bob, or vice versa, and burning smell or scorched oil smell. And Maddie reveals this, but then we have the attack. She screams. He rushes after her. And that moment when he goes through the doorway and his hand hits the side of the frame there and the camera is still, that is so scary. And he brings her down. And then you have that brilliant, frightening juxtaposition between Leland attacking and assaulting Maddie. And then it cuts to a slow motion Bob, and then a spotlight shining on them, and that slow motion sound of the scream. Oh my goodness! And then he chases her, just violent acts, punching her. It's very scary. And then she's panicking, of course, and in the slow motion, he says, somebody help me, just screaming her life out. And then she's thrown to the couch and just screaming. And then we get back to Leland, and we see it's Leland who is punching her, which is a very frightening concept, very frightening. And then we see this very, it's quite disturbing. And this is a moment too when you see that moment in the slow motion aspect, and she's screaming, Maddie. You can see in the background also, and also afterwards, the picture of Laura Palmer. So it's like Laura Palmer's in the background and Maddie's in the foreground in this this weird, twisted, and utterly frightening and horrifying a scene that's taking place right now. And it's made even more horrifying, of course, because of then this embrace. Maddie's alive but injured, and blood is coming from her eyes and her mouth. It's very, very, very disturbing. And then we have Leland, who seems to be crying and screaming, Laura, Laura, Laura. And you have shots of the slow motion and Bob, who's just, it's really disgusting. Trying to just kissing her, and just, it's very disgusting indeed. So this is really disturbing stuff. And so we have this weird thing going on of what is the relationship then between Bob and Leland? Is Leland fully aware of what's going on as Bob is doing this stuff? Is Leland more responsible than he might be letting on? Or maybe is there something where Leland is totally innocent and he can't do anything when Bob is in control? Who knows? It's not clear at this moment. One can speculate, but it's not quite clear at this moment. We're going to have to figure out what this relationship is as we go into other episodes, perhaps. But for now, what we have is this back and forth. And then when we cut to the shot of Leland again in the regular speed, and we have, it sounds like Leland says, and so he speaks of Leland in the third person. So the assumption is now Bob is in control. You're going back to Missoula, Montana, in that final terrible act, and in the wall. And then just this means that Madeline, the assumption is, of course, Madeline has been killed. It's very, very frightening scene, violent scene, and it also it's with a shot of the letter under the fingernail. So it's quite a I mean, it's a famous scene. It's an infamous scene. It's one of the most catastrophic and important events in Twin Peaks history. And this is also the point where we understand as viewers that Bob is in Leland. Leland is Bob, whatever that relationship is. Again, we'll have to chart that when we talk about other episodes. But also the assumption that we can make is that Leland is likely to, therefore, the killer of Laura Palmer. And we can assume this because not only what he's doing to Maddie or what he has done to Maddie, how he's killed her, but also the letter under the fingernail. So again, we're going to have to figure out more of what's going on. What is this? What is this situation? Why is this? If Leland is really the killer of Laura Palmer, what's going on? How did this happen? Why is this happening? What's the history of Bob? Remember too, Leland said that he recognized who this person was Robertson, right, because of his grandfather's house, Pearl Lakes, right. But of course, Hawk does some investigating and talks to some other property owners and nearby, and said they didn't, they had nothing, no idea what was going on here. So it's interesting too in Twin Peaks. I forgot to mention about property and the line of ownership. It's a very important thing about who owned the property or who owned the lot before, or so there's this idea of property. And real estate. Ghostwood, of course, is mentioned, but also this idea of Pearl Lakes is mentioned, who owned the vacant lot or who owned the White House, who owned the house on the other side of the summer house on Pearl Lakes and things like that. So let's keep in mind, too, how property and the line of the chain of ownership, how this falls actually very importantly into the investigation dynamic of Twin Peaks in many ways. So I'll just leave it at that. But here, yes, so the idea is that Leland did reveal that he knew, or he recognized the artist rendering of the silver-haired man who we now know, or the silver-haired person or entity, whatever he is, whatever it is, that is known as Bob. So this is something else entirely. We're going to have to figure out what's going on here. But the implication or the assumption that we can make reasonably is that, yes, Leland is the killer of Laura Palmer. And he is indeed, yes, the killer of Madeline Ferguson. So it is a very shocking episode. It is a very sad episode. It is a very monumentally huge episode. And you don't need me to tell you this. Just about everyone who knows Twin Peaks and is a fan of Twin Peaks will probably say the same thing. This is huge. This is so huge. And then that makes The World Spins, the song The World Spins, so heavy. And it makes it so important in the lore of Twin Peaks. So let's remember this. The World Spins, the song, the Julie Cruz number. And we'll see if it has a resonance and echo that will be carried through maybe throughout or maybe in subsequent episodes, who knows. But for now, it is very, very important indeed. And over this moment, we go back to the roadhouse, of course. And there's a look of sadness on the giant's face. There's also a look of a type of... the sadness continues on because we see Bobby at the bar. The waiter then comes slowly towards Cooper. And that line by the waiter, that line is very powerful. So powerful in its simplicity and honesty, which is, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, that, wow. And you then go see, you see Bobby, who's there. And remember early in the episode, Bobby wasn't necessarily the most sympathetic character in this episode, especially when he was talking to Shelley and the money and everything like that early on. But here, my heart really goes out to Bobby. And he's sitting there and he's looking almost like he has second sight or something, or he has the gift, as it's called. He can sense something is wrong. That's a very interesting thing. Does Bobby, how does he know something is wrong? He just feels it in the air, right? Or something. Maybe it's something in the air, right? What did we hear from the very get-go, right? Where we're from, the birds sing a pretty song, and there's always music in the air. And maybe that music is something that Bobby can hear right now. And maybe that music right now is the sad heaviness of The World Spins, because indeed something very sad and very heavy has occurred right now, and Bobby can sense that. So you can see Bobby is very upset. And to Donna seems to have a similar type of situation, feeling something wrong, feeling sad. James, bless his heart, James is cool, yes, but James doesn't seem to have that same sense of, because James is wondering what's wrong with Donna. He then goes next to her, tries to console her, but Donna is crying. It reminds me of that scene, at the very start, the pilot, when James and Donna are in class in school, and they see that there's some commotion. What's going on? So a police officer visits the teacher, and then they hear a scream and someone's running out, and then they see Laura Palmer's empty chair, and they don't need to hear anything more. They know what's happened. There's a look of exchange between James And Donna has that thing about holding her arm across her like this. She's starting to cry. So at that point, remember, James had a sense, I think, of what was going on. Here, in this scene, in episode 14, James doesn't seem to have a sense of what's going on, but that's okay. That's okay, because we have Bobby, we have the waiter, we have Donna, who's now crying. Again, this scene of crying is very much like an echo of her crying from the pilot. And we also have Margaret, who then looks towards Cooper, and then Cooper, who's now looking. And then we see also the shot of Julie Cruz, who's wearing this red dress against the red curtains. And then, of course, we have the look of Dale Cooper, that slow motion look as the curtains are superimposed. And there we go. And those red curtains have so much meaning. So, yes, this is a huge episode, And I think, too, we should begin to question, we should begin to wonder, Dale Cooper, what is his role? What is his role going to be? I mean, it's certainly something that he is shown in this episode the way he is. He is a man of action, that's for sure. He's a man who's of great intellect and has great skills as a detective, and also great intuition, and also great way with people. But also we have to wonder, right? What is his role in all of this? What is it that he can do, or perhaps what is it he is unable to do? What is it that he is unable to stop? What is it that he is powerless to stop? So maybe this type of thing is beginning to creep in, right? Because Madeline is being killed just at the point where Dale Cooper, what is he doing? Is he engaged in some kind of action scene? No, he's sitting at a table, listening to music. So this is, I think, a very subtle clue, perhaps, as well, that maybe we can begin to examine, consider the character of Dale Cooper. Granted, he is our hero, and indeed that final shot of him looking is a suggestion of the fact that, yes, his mission is to continue on. And if anyone can complete that mission, it's our hero, Dale Cooper. Yes, I totally understand that reading of the final moments of this episode, yes. But there's also a little bit of room for wondering how indeed effective Dale Cooper is, or maybe he might be a bit more powerless than one might have thought or hoped in these early episodes. So we'll have to wait and see if there's any fruit that such a tree bears, or maybe it is something that will not find voice, because indeed Dale Cooper will be truly the heroic figure. Well, we shall have to wait and see. It also depends on how we interpret this as well. There might be a sense of humanity and a type of fragility. After all, Dale has mentioned something about love, or lost love, perhaps, Pittsburgh, and being damaged or wounded in some way. Who knows? We're going to have to find out more about this. Maybe there's something to that, and the quote-unquote power and influence, and also the helplessness and powerlessness of the great character that is Dale Cooper. And I think that's all there in the final seconds of this episode as it closes over those red curtains. Those very, very important red curtains. We've seen them before, and dare I say it, yes, we will definitely see them again. All right, so yes, a lot to be said. There is, of course, I neglected to mention, as I think about it, Margaret saying, she doesn't know what's going to happen when, but there are owls in the roadhouse. Some more owl imagery, or more owl references, I should say. The nighttime, the darkness, Leland and Sarah, this white horse, what happened to Madeline, the letter, and the like, and Ben Horne being arrested, but it seems like maybe Ben Horne, right? We'll have to figure out what happens to Ben Horne after this. Oh, I forgot too. Well, my goodness, I forgot a huge thing too, which is Tojimura. Tojimura and Catherine Martell. Who'd have thunk it, huh? Well, I guess, this idea of the makeup and the like, and Pete in the bar, with in the earlier episode with the milk and that, but he comes in this episode, and then Tojimura kisses him on the mouth, and there's a voice, and then suddenly it turns into Catherine Martell's voice. So yes, Catherine Martell is alive. Yes, so we're gonna have to figure out what this plot is. It's a what a weird revelation, but you kind of guessed that something was up with Tojimura. There was something not quite right with it. Looked like something that was some kind of something, it just was, there was something off, and you realize that was due to this being some kind of makeup appliance, and Catherine Martell was actually under this heavy makeup to pretend to be someone else. So very interesting development indeed, but and so we'll see how that transpires. So there's that, and there's also the stuff with Shelley Johnson and Leo, and then of course Leland Palmer, and then the death of Maddie, and then what will Cooper do about this? What will he even know about this? Will he even figure out what's going on about this or not? We'll have to wait and see. Again, we'll have to wait and see. But that's part of the greatness of Twin Peaks. There's still more going on. There are more questions that are being raised. As questions are being answered, old questions are being answered, new questions are being raised. And that's kind of the cycle of Twin Peaks, right? Which is a great thing. This episode, one can say that a number of questions are being answered, and perhaps the question that is being answered here, at least one can assume is being answered, is who killed Laura Palmer? And we can assume, again, we don't quite know because we haven't gotten any validation yet on screen. We haven't gotten it yet, but the assumption can be made, I think, with a high degree of confidence, that the answer to the question, who killed Laura Palmer, is indeed Leland Palmer. Although, as we understand with this idea or notion or entity called Bob, and all that entails, owls, whatever that means, and whatever the connection is, we can understand that the answer to the question is more complicated than meets the eye, and thus it leads to more questions, right? So what is the relationship between Bob and Leland? How did this happen if indeed it happened? What's going to happen going forward? Who's Mike? How does Mike fit into it? We understand kind of what Mike is, but there's still a lot of stuff in the air that's going on. So again, the answers then lead to more questions. So that is one of the great, and so frustrating in a brilliant way aspects of Twin Peaks. As things are being answered, more questions are being raised. And my goodness, whenever you go into Twin Peaks, you might as well, right? For people who are maybe relatively new to Twin Peaks, it's going to be, that's the way it is. There's always going to be questions raised. There's always going to be a question. There's never a feeling where everything has been fully answered. That is part of the fun. That is part of the joy. That is part of the great, frustrating joy. That is the experience of watching these episodes, and then to wonder and to think and to speculate and to theorize, but then also to absorb and to engage with on a subjective level of intuition, as well as having this great experience of watching. It's all here. It's all here in this amazing way, in this captivating way. And yes, in this so extreme and subtle and human and entertaining work of art that is Twin Peaks. And right, episode 14, we're not finished yet. There's still so much to go. I cannot wait. But for now, wow, what an episode indeed. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great TV shows and movies, including Twin Peaks. Cheers.